guys, thank
You
you
look great.
for being here. Congratulations on the film. And I want to begin with Tim. Tim, I think a lot of people are excited to get to know you now after this film. Can you just tell us a little bit about where you are from and your prior film? This is your third film, and just sort of what led you to this amazing story.
This is my third movie. I'm from Switzerland. I studied at the Munich Film School. That's also why in Munich that tragic story is much more present. We wanted to do something generally about that day in Munich. So we were with the writer and the producers, we were researching a lot on all sides. We had access to the police files that only recently have been made accessible to the public. We researched about the politician side, everything. And also quite early on, we learned that the media played an important role on that day, especially the TV channel ABC Sports, because they were the only ones having a live camera on site. We were then lucky enough to find an eyewitness and had a conversation with him. That is Jeffrey Mason, the character that John plays in the movie. And we had a quite long research conversation with him, and it was really interesting, and he told us about everything that they experienced, that he experienced in these 22 hours of broadcasting on this tragedy. And this was so interesting and seemed also in a way so, although it's happened such a long time ago, so relevant for today's media world in a way. Afterwards we then said, like, maybe it could be an idea that we tell the story only from that perspective. And this I immediately found intriguing because, like, just from a filmmaker's point of view, to tell a story that takes place in that condensed space is an interesting challenge, right? How do you do that? I love movies that take place in a very condensed space and time.
Hitchcock and all these.
Rear Window is probably the best example, where you also have the camera only as a window to the outside world. The other thing is that, as someone who's working in the media myself, I found it connected to that, or I thought that this is something that I could tell a story about. Nowadays, it's more and more in the it's an important discussion, and who can tell a story and what, right? And I think that's good that we have this discussion more and more. And I felt that, can I tell something about the media? Yes, I can. Probably other sides of that story, I don't know if I would be.
Right.
Of course, also producers love the idea for another reason also. We could do it for only a fraction of the original budget. The original script was really long, and then we didn't really know how to finance that. And I'm just saying that because I think it's an interesting example of that sometimes a restriction of budget can inspire creative thoughts.
Absolutely.
That maybe then lead to a more interesting result.
Well, and one limitation that I think you guys imposed upon yourselves, which is really cool about this film, I think, is the fact that you were going to blend actors with archival footage, but that was not going to be possible without the blessing of ABC, which is now owned by Disney. Was that Jeff Mason, as one of the original guys who was a survivor of that day, was he able to help facilitate access to some of that?
Oh yeah, very much. It's exactly as you say. I can take credit for that. That was the producers that really did a tremendous job on getting these rights, because it was really complicated. And at the same time, it seemed crucial for us to have that footage, because it would have been really tough to recreate or imitate Jim McKay with an actor. But and then the real Jeffrey Mason, he's very connected in the sports world still. And when I was with John and I went to control rooms in New York to study the dynamics there, to how these people talk to each other and everything. And when we were there was a lucky incident that I ran into the son of Jim McKay, Sean McManus, who was the head of CBS Sports. He then also gave us his blessing.
Well, let's talk about how this amazing ensemble came together. And John, can you lead us off? I mean, Jeff is unfortunately one of the few real people who from that control room who are still with us. When you heard about this project, what was it that excited you the most? And then also having access to Jeff, was that something you were able to really benefit from?
So I started reading it, kept me on the edge of my seat. I found it thrilling. And for me, there were two things that really struck me about it. First, I knew about the Munich '72 massacre, was familiar with that, but I didn't know that it was a sports team that covered it. I thought it was a news team. I didn't know a sports team changed the way we tell these kinds of tragic events forever. But also the story of Jeff in the center of it as this, young, ambitious producer who's kind of being pushed and pulled by these two men, a legend like Rune, who he wants to impress to advance his career, and then a mentor in Marvin who is kind of the voice of what journalism is supposed to be. So that struggle for him, but also not being able to think because he has to do his job, was just a rich opportunity. And I knew I wanted to be a part of it. So as soon as I was done, made the call, yes. Then Tim immediately got me in contact with Jeff Mason. So not only did he help us get the rights to the actual footage, which was a game changer, because we didn't know we were going to get that footage until about 2 weeks before we started shooting. And Tim and Martz had to go back and sort of address the script to facilitate all this great footage we now had. But Jeff also told me what he went through that day, made it very clear that they were just doing their job. There was no time to think. You were a professional and you did what you were trained to do. Like journalism 101 kicks in that situation. Being in those rooms, you learn the language. It's a very specific language. And it's a shorthand. And anyone who's been in those booths would see through it if we didn't hold ourselves to 100% authenticity to what they go through. And those couple months of research really gave me the foundation, and that wouldn't have been possible without Jeff Mason.
That's great. Peter, let's first note that this is 21 years after another great movie about journalist ethics that you were a part of, Shattered Glass. When you saw this one come along, again, what for you kind of was the most appealing aspect, and then also how did you deal with the lack of what John was saying? You have the guy to talk to. Rune died in 2002. Were there other ways to kind of get a sense beyond the script of what he was all about?
I didn't think it mattered very much. I thought, sometimes when I'm playing a real person that nobody knows that well, there are people that know Rune, but I assume that most people don't. Is being true to yourself is being true to them, right? Like, I honor myself and that will honor them. I won't throw them under the bus just like I wouldn't throw myself under the bus. I'm very, very script oriented, as Tim knows. It's interesting when I hear Tim talk because you talk like a journalist. The way that you approached this is, I'm like, oh, wouldn't that be nice if people got into that kind of granular in terms of understanding an event? When I met him, the thing that made me want to do the movie is I read the script and I liked the script. I'd seen the documentary Day in September. It's just so obvious when you hang out with this guy for 10 minutes that he has like a really strong dedication to a kind of authenticity. That was the other thing that attracted me to the project, was that I could see that these questions that were being asked in a very kind of simple, sincere, naive way by these guys that it's not really their job, but they're trying to think about the news in the way that the news should go out, in the way that all of us think about it. When I see Jim McKay's performance in this movie, that's why I do the movie. I feel almost like we are all actors trying to be in kind of the same world as that documentary footage in whatever way that we can, but we're supporting that moment. The movie is leading up to that moment. I think people react very emotionally to that moment because it's a man who's not making the moment about himself. I mean, Rune Ulrich went on to make The Celebrity Anchor and all these celebrity anchors that we have in one way or another. It's about them. And I saw the humility of a man trying to serve the information, and that's what really drew me to the project.
Ben, Marvin Bader died in 2012, I believe, and so again, in this case, was there for you a need that you felt to dig beyond the script?
the need to dig deeper than the script. I mean, I just think it's your sort of your basic duty to if someone existed to find out as much as you can. Sometimes a script is just a representation of somebody, well, it always is, and it's not necessarily when you do research on them, it's not necessarily reflected in the script. There was a very limited amount that I could find about Marvin Bailey. What I could find was very helpful because it was consistent. He was sort of universally liked and admired. There's a couple of quotes will do it sometimes. Bob Iger said something that was really helpful: irascible, grumpy, huge-hearted, warm. Loved who he worked with and loved by those he worked with. But Tim's script was accurate to that. And I've actually never discussed this with Tim, not because I avoid talking to directors, but I never discussed why, him being the conscience of the movie, and whether or not that was something they found out from Jeff Mason. I assume it wasn't, but to me it seems he was a producer of live events, more logistical than technical broadcast man. But he was both sides. But he was somebody whose job it was to troubleshoot enormous events, massive logistical events that hadn't really occurred before. I think it sort of seemed to me anyway accurate that he would be the one concerned about possible terrible things happening, possible disasters, because that was his job to foresee them and prevent them. Their job is just to shoot it as best as possible and get it out there, right? Regardless
Follow the story wherever it goes.
Yeah, follow the story wherever it goes. And that wasn't Marvin's job. It was to look after everybody, but also to make sure nothing awful happened.
Another thing that I imagine might have affected the way you worked was the space itself, what it was filled with. So, Tim, can you first just explain how you guys landed on that one primary setting, just the layout of that room, and then also what you filled it with? And then
He wants to know about our really awesome gear.
That's true.
All this stuff works.
Yes.
I mean, I just have to say, that's one of the things that's amazing about this movie being in it, is the monitors they weren't green screens. The reel-to-reels worked. The fax machine seemed to work. I mean, all of that is unbelievable.
That never happens, especially
No,
with old
it's
things.
strange.
You show up on the day and it doesn't work. Fake it. Never had to do that.
Right.
Always worked.
And
German
that
equipment.
doesn't happen by accident, right, Tim? You guys
Had
sourced
Germans.
German
that
equipment,
stuff,
German
but also
engineering.
the room itself. I mean, you didn't make up what this room looked like, right? There were some records, weren't there?
No, especially the control room. I could show you pictures of the original control room, like that we got from Jeff Mason, compared to how our set looked, and it would be like really amazing. With some other rooms, we maybe took a little bit more liberties or so, but the control room, for example, is really accurate. And the production designer found the original construction plans and more or less according to them rebuild it. And then also these the private photos we got from Jeff or whatever, that were really helpful. If you do a film about the media is ultimately then in a way about technology also, right? About cameras, about telephones, about walkie-talkies. And I thought, like, if you do something about that, then this also has to be real in a way, right? They got to be able, if John gives a direction as Jeff, it has to have some kind of a effect on the monitor wall. And I wanted everything that comes. This is basically about a movie about people reacting to things that's coming from the outside. And I always wanted to happen that in real, right? So we try to simulate as much as possible. I mean,
That's funny you say that, because I had a feeling at one point when we were filming, I was like, this reminds me of when I did a submarine movie. And because it was like that, right? Like you're underwater, the periscope goes up, and they're out there somewhere. And it had the same technical aspects and the same camaraderie and all of that kind of stuff.
it's funny that you say
Yeah.
that, because I watched Das Boot again,
Das
of course,
Ah.
in preparation. Yeah.
But it was. I mean, it was claustrophobic, and it was stuffy, and it was
Two
hot at
cameras,
times,
ducking under cameras.
everything, and we were all in there. I thought, for me, one of my favorite moments, and I don't get to go outside, is when the helicopters go overhead, and everyone's like, "I got to get out of here. I got to go see it." It's like almost like a submarine when you go up on the top and you get some fresh air in the moment. I just feel like there's this need to escape this room, but Jeffrey stays in it. And I also want to, in that, beyond the set pieces, I think we got to give a lot of credit to our background actors. You know, oftentimes when you make a film, background actors come in and out, you never see them again. They were so much part of the ensemble, and a lot of them got speaking roles in it.
I actually think one of the most vocal actors every time we went to go do a scene was one of those background actors.
Which one?
You know who I'm talking
Yeah,
about?
Anyway, they did such a fantastic job, and they played with us. They were there. They listened. They were there. And some of them, I believe, had broadcast experience, right?
Yeah, we had some because Aiden also went to control rooms in Germany, and then we had some of the people that are in the background. My idea was to have some people that worked really in control rooms because, as John said, it's just a very specific way of moving and everything. They wanted to have also the background to feel real in a way.
It was at Venice, it was at Telluride, but people are really still catching up to it. And so I wonder who's had a chance to see this movie with audiences? What have you made of the kind of feedback that you've received from them? And also, I believe, from Jeff, who, again, is very much with us and has seen the film.
This is the second screens that I experienced in the USA. Like, and I was in Telluride and here, and I found it really interesting that it's so different how much more engaged the audience is in a way. Like, for example, I never had a screening where everybody laughed here when the athlete, you know, the guy who disguised himself an athlete. I said, it was really great to see it with you here. And of course, also, if we showed the film in Germany, they also reacted to different things, right? You can feel, there are different issues, so to say, or topics that are present there, maybe even more than here.
I haven't seen it with an audience. It makes me anxious seeing it with an audience. So I saw it with it does. I don't know what
It makes me anxious watching it by myself.
Really? I'd rather watch it by myself.
Are you
He
kidding
always
me?
does
It's
that.
terrible by yourself.
But I will say, as far as Jeff Mason goes, early days, he was worried. He was definitely anxious about this story being told. And slowly, he sort of started to let his guard down, and I think we assuaged his fears as he saw dailies come in and all those kinds of things. But when he saw it, he wrote me the most wonderful email, giving it his blessing, so excited, and he continues to be very excited that it's coming out and eager to do anything he can to champion it. So having his blessing is, that's pretty amazing. Yeah.
I think Thomas was there and John, the two producers, when he watched it. I unfortunately couldn't experience it when he watched it for the first time, and then he turned to them and I think like quite moved, said like this is exactly how he experienced it. I want to add one more thing because he said to me that's important that I mention this because he's a very humble guy. He said like, of course, you also took certain artistic liberties to combine functions that were originally done by several people in his character. So just want to mention that.
Well, I guess just as a final thing, is there something that you hope people take away from this film? And also, do you think the media 52 years later, would they make better, would they have learned from some of the mistakes or pitfalls that occurred in that control room 52 years ago?
Well, that's a very simple question that I can answer very quickly indeed. I think in the words of Heidegger, I think the tragedy is that we haven't learned, and the part is, is it just human nature? Is it Roman circus? Do we want to go and watch? And the more we watch, do we get more desensitized? I hope it just asks a question again, so we think about it again, about the responsibility, or at least the effect of live coverage, what that means, what the consequences of that are, whether they're intended, unintended, unforeseen. We have to be aware of that. But how can we in any way control it or mitigate for it when everybody has it in their phone and everybody's got it in their pocket and can live stream at any moment. This is where I start to get really depressed. I'm going to bring everybody down. And I don't know. I'm an actor. I say other people's lines. No one's written these. Can you tell? These men were innocent. They weren't trained to do this, but they still were troubled by it. And I hope that we can try and again be troubled by it at least and worry about the consequences of it.
I think on this day, a Pandora's box was open that has been amplified and has become commonplace, especially in our 24-hour news cycle. I don't even think the questions that were asked among our characters on that day are asked in many newsrooms anymore. I think it is driving only towards the sensational and only towards the ratings. Obviously, we all know this. We've become extraordinarily polarized as a country. My hope, two things. One, people will go into this with their preconceived notions of what this film is, checked at the door, and go into it with an open mind. And second, I hope they can walk out asking those questions again about what their consumption of the media should be and what their expectation of news is, and maybe start talking to people in different camps about how we've allowed the media to push us deeper and deeper apart.
Obviously, what's true in 1972 is still true today in terms of the events that are taking place in the movie. And what I hope people don't come away talking about are the issues that the movie doesn't get into. The movie is really about who gets to tell the story. Does the camera tell the truth? How do we get back to sharing a common, simple truth that is the story?
Today, everybody has a camera and a TV in their pocket at the same time. I mean, and I think it is interesting, especially for today's audience, then to take a step back and to look when was that when a tragic event like this was on live television for the first time. To a lot of these questions, I at least think the answers are not simple. We just want to raise them. To a lot of these questions, I don't know the answer. Can we show violence on TV or not? Of course, there are also examples where it led to something at the end, positive movement to show tragic things that happen. So I also don't think that it's not a solution just to. I think this movie is ultimately about the importance, but also the complexity on reporting on a crisis situation. And I think, as you said, and in this case, it's interesting because it was sports people, so we can, in a way, they had this innocent view on this, so we can raise all these questions and confront them with them that are important questions. Yeah.
Thank you guys for a great film. Thank you for being here.